Alrighty. So look, as traders, we're always trying to make those slight evolvements and improvements to, what we're doing. We are not jumping around like headless chickens, just chasing, shiny balls, between all of these different sorts of strategies like every few weeks or months. As soon as you hit any little rocky period in your trading, whether that's just, through your own performance or perhaps the strategy just going through a natural bit of drawdown, in its random distribution with its expected probabilities. But that said, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't constantly be looking for ways to make those slight tweaks and improvements to what we are doing, and always striving to think about how we can, do things better, right? So the process in which we follow and which we recommend you guys do is we're always looking to identify if we have any consistent problems in our trading. How do we do that? Well, that's why we do daily markups. We have our journal where we're reviewing that every week, month, quarter, and doing that big annual review. It's the boring, horrible, painful process that we need to do, but it's really where you can essentially dig for the gold to find those, those gaps in your strategy you can improve. So once you've done that, first step is you need to be very, very clear on what is the current obvious problem with the trading that we can improve. Once you know what that problem is, then you can ask the right questions to then come up with potential mechanical solutions that you think may improve that problem, right? Then you go and test it, do that as many times as you need and how you want to do it. Eventually, you will get to the point in which you're happy that it makes a significant improvement to your trading, and then you can implement it. And then we just continuously repeat those 5 steps, okay? Now, we are always looking to this with our trading, and we've done that over the years with Photon, and we've obviously brought you on that journey as our strategy naturally evolves with us. So some of the ones that we have done that with, if I can find the white box, was the first kind of major one that comes to my mind is structure, where back in I think the start of 2022, volatility picked up significantly. And back then we only used 2 types of structure. So we only use swing and fractal. And to cut a long story short, we don't need to go into the details, but essentially, fractal structure, before that would be quite a good signal that we were getting those swing pullbacks to start and end. But we quickly found that obviously it was giving us a lot more false signals. We were then dealing with massive swing ranges. So to cut a long story short, we introduced the 3 types of structure, and that massively, improved our strategy overall for all the reasons you guys have seen as you have now been through the course, right? We've got a much deeper understanding of how price action is moving, right? We really have those clear expectations of price action, reducing those false signals and allowing us to handle that sort of more volatile price action, right? And then we, refreshed and upgraded the course to reflect that. Another one of the big problems for a lot of the community was that, most people were struggling with day trading, whether that's, with their jobs and commitments, time zones of where they live, and other things, right? So that's when Tomas then implemented the swing strategy, obviously less time consuming on the charts, can work with your job. It's easier in the psychology for a lot of people. Bigger stop losses means there's lower slippage risk, in turn lower commissions, in turn lower leverage and margin required. Spreads become less of an issue, right? If you're with a broker that doesn't have those tight spreads, you can trade it alongside those day trading results, right? To diversify and smooth out your equity curve a little bit. And obviously the diversification from trading, more than one pair, okay? And then really probably the biggest upgrade we made to the course since then is liquidity, right? Where we had quite a lot of questions that we didn't really have mechanical answers to, such as when price first mitigates a zone, is that initial mitigation going to be a trap, and is it too early to get involved, right? Do we get in on that first initial shock, or do we need to wait for a bit more? Do we take the flip or the extreme? There was always a bit of didn't really have a solid mechanical process for that. Is the POI that we're looking to trade from, is that going to hold, or is it acting as inducement for a POI, behind it, right? How do we mechanically define how near inducement needs to be, right? That lid to the left or anything that's forming in the pullback, right? How near do we need it to be to our zone, right? We kind of knew we wanted inducement. We knew we wanted to see sweeps, but we didn't have a mechanical way to put it all together. So sometimes we would get in on the first shock. Sometimes we would wait for a bit more. And obviously that's not ideal, right? We don't want to be umming and ahhing. We want to know exactly what we're waiting for. Any of the liquidity that we can see that has been generated, from that lid to the left or the pullback to the right, has it already been used, right? And then how do we mechanically define whether it is a strong liquidation or not? These are all the problems. Introducing the liquidity entry models and everything around that module solved us for that, right? So for those of you who've been through the course and been here a while, This is essentially the liquidity entry models, right? That kind of bakes in our solution to all of those questions pretty much, and gave us mechanical solutions for that. Now, this was great. It gave us a ton more confirmation. Like I said, it solved all the benefits of this question, so I don't need to go into that in any more depth. But introducing, more rules and solutions or whatever can obviously have a butterfly effect where it may improve your strike rate and it may do, bring benefits as we've discussed, but it can also lead to creating additional problems, right? Now, we are not looking for the holy grail, right? The perfect strategy. No losses or wins, all of that good stuff, right? We know that is living in a fantasy, but we can definitely refine and improve this. So what are probably the main problems, at least in my experience, that I have found since using this in the last year? Really, for me, reflecting on it, looking back through all of my data and talking to the team about it, and also seeing, all of you guys in the community, these are kind of the obvious problems that definitely come to mind. First, and probably main one being trade frequency or lack thereof it. The great thing about having those liquidity entry models is, it's a pretty comprehensive entry model. There's quite a lot of confirmation you need to wait for and to play out. So that's great because it can save you from getting in a lot of unnecessary and early trades that would be losses. But a lot of times it's not always going to give you that entry. If I go back, right, if we focus on, for instance, like the sort of the main entry model that we trade, which is the fake break, right? We wait for a lot to happen. We're patient. We wait for our, we've built the narrative, POI selection. We wait for our POI mitigation. We then look to see, has a strong liquidation occurred? Okay, it's occurred. Then we identify the PBL. We wait for the PBL to flip. We wait for, to fail. We wait for the chalk. Okay, now we can set our entry order. And as you guys have probably experienced a lot of times, it just does this and goes off without us, which is incredibly frustrating. Not if it happens a few times, but when it's happening more often than not, right? Because, having that lower trade frequency, not getting tagged into those positions, can have a real effect on your actual real performance. Because when you go and backtest, it might actually be okay because obviously, you can basically take every valid trade when you backtest. But we're living in reality, right? Things get in the way, real life commitments. Maybe we're just not focused. Maybe you had a bad night's sleep. Maybe we're ill. We're going on holiday, whatever. It's unrealistic as a manual trader to think that you're going to hit every single trade. So if trade frequency is low with a strategy, and then you end up missing that sort of one or two winners that month, or those add up over the quarter, right? It can really affect your results. That and then in turn really affects your psychology, and then it's sort of a self-perpetuating cycle where it can get worse, right? And you start making more and more mistakes. All of these three are pretty related, right? Trade frequency is low because we're not getting tagged, and then it's extremely frustrating that we have this, I don't want to say perfect analysis, but like we have a very comprehensive way of looking at the market. We have a very deep understanding with market structure, with liquidity, with doing that POI selection, that far more often than not, our analysis is on the right side of the market, right? Price tends to go in the direction of our directional bias that we build, and it tends to react from the POIs that we're looking at, right? And then not being able to capitalize on those moves more often than not, it's tough, right? It's frustrating, and that can definitely be improved because if we're getting that directional bias correct more often than not, and if we're identifying the areas in which that directional bias plays out from, why can't we improve it to capitalize on that more? Okay? And then also lastly, it's a bit more of a small thing, and it's probably more of an issue on the M1 to be fair, but it's kind of like, although the liquidity entry models did tell us whether to take the flip or the extreme, depending on what rules you use, i.e. I suggest that if there is a PBL flip, take the flip. Sometimes on the M1, it was a bit iffy. Like sometimes I would, you want to cover your stop loss on both the flip and the extreme, so you've just taken care of both. Sometimes it's like, has the flip already been slightly mitigated or not? Sometimes there's a few more POI. It's a bit, there's still a bit of hesitation at times. And we want to remove as much hesitation as possible, especially when it comes to your execution. So again, just to say that all of these problems really, kind of compound in a way because it also leads to more psychological errors, right? If your trade frequency is low, if you're not getting tagged in positions, it leads to that scarcity mindset, understandably, which then leads to FOMO and other things, right? And it's just not conducive to having the most optimal results that I believe we should be getting based on, how good our analysis is, like I spoke about earlier. So me and the team have been doing a lot of work on potential solutions to improve this. And I'm not going to waste any more, spend of, I don't want to drag you guys through the whole process of what we've gone over through the last few months to do that. We overcomplicated things massively, but we have now settled on a very simple solution that is a very small change to what we're doing, but has a big improvement to it. And that's what we're going to go through in the next lessons.